name is Mancuso. I'm with St. Mary Excel, and what we do is we facilitate people coming together. Like, there's so many different entities, and we so much work better when we work together. So we work better. So it's been a while, and I've introduced myself. So we would like to go around and introduce who's here today and who is represented. So we're just excited and start by.
I'm Vera Jellicky. I'm with Rotary International.
Ruby Mays, St. Mary Excel.
Billy Chapman with the Borough Police Department, but I'm sitting in for Mayor Duval Walker. He had another engagement, so he asked that I represent the town of Borough.
Jessica Stamps, the National Academies of Sciences, Gulf Research Program.
John Patrick Myers. I'm a Morgan City High School student here in teacher.
Mrs. Smith, Morgan City High School.
Kyle McCullough, Morgan City High School.
Cindy Cutrera, Port of Morgan City.
Luke Tamparello, City of Morgan City.
Mike Wade, Port of Morgan City.
Mike Ricotta, St. Mary Levy District.
Virgil Allen with the Rig Museum.
Bryce Merrill with the Rig Museum. Mike Allen with the Rig Museum.
Vanessa Spinola with the Cajun Coast.
Stephen Swiber with Diner Services.
Scott Hemmerling with Water Institute of the Gulf.
Kelly Boudreaux with St. Mary Excel and business owner.
Brian Roberts of Walcott.
Mary Beadle, a retired teacher and administrator.
Alice Pecoraro, St. Mary Excel.
Jenny Shack Snyder, Maple State University.
Sheila Hugh, Young Memorial Campus, SLCC.
Carl Moore, Maritime Division, SLCC.
Al McGrath, Maritime Division, SLCC.
So all those people working together, I mean, good things are going to happen. That's quite a crew of people. So thank you, and thank you for making it important to be here. I'm going to ask Kelly if she would mind. She's been working on LANERR and presenting it, so she gets the honors.
Yeah, I think I know the next conversation, we're excited to hear the status of the LANERR process and where we are with the application process. So we have Dr. Brian Roberts with us, and he's chairman of the Atchafalaya Zone Application process, Associate Director of Science, Associate Professor, and REU Program Director. So he's going to come up and let us know where we are with LANERR.
I put it on the desktop. Okay. So thank you all for having me here today. I'm Brian Roberts. I'm the lead of the Atchafalaya team, along with Justin Lemoyne and Jimmy Nelson. And one of the things that we really wanted to do when we put together our team to figure out what was appropriateness of the Atchafalaya Basin as a NER was to make sure that we got a diverse team that was working together on this. So it wasn't just a bunch of academics. We do have some of those, and some of the key ones that are in the region associated with it. We tried to make sure that we brought in a lot of other interests into that process. Many of you may know what a NER is, but I'm going to briefly go over a little bit about that here. So this is a national network of 30 coastal sites that have been designated to protect and study estuarine ecosystems. The little green, does this work? Oh yeah, cool. The little green symbols are representing those. Actually, Connecticut was just designated in the last couple months, and right now Green Bay, Wisconsin is in development. This is a long process, and you need to get it right, and you need to figure out how best to design it. The network is to protect areas representative of various biogeographic regions and estuarine types. And as you can see, we have these regions here, and there's a little bit of a glaring hole that's been here for a very long time. So there's over 1.4 million acres that are protected. This is for long-term research and monitoring, education and training, research stewardship. The vision is that resilient estuaries and coastal watersheds where human and natural communities thrive. The mission is to protect and promote the stewardship of coasts and estuaries through innovative research, education, and training using place-based system of protected areas. So this is a state and federal partnership. Our state role is land ownership and management. reserve staff members, program implementation, and we provide 30% match of the funding. The federal role is the national policy and program guidance, technical assistance, program coordination, and they provide the bulk of the funding. They also provide the leverage of the entire network behind it to try to help out with how things go in terms of development. And so there have been NOAA representatives that have been part of this site development process in Louisiana. You know, it's a little bit warm here, so I think I need to take this shirt off. So, you know, it's really important where we go about finding a good place for a NEAR. And, you know, obviously I have my own biases in this process, but I think it's really a pretty obvious choice. And I'm a person I've worked in these NEAR sites. I did my master's research in a NEAR site in Wacoit Bay up in Massachusetts and Cape Cod. I've done work, extensive work in North Inlet, Winyat Bay in South Carolina. And I currently have a project funded by NASA where we're actually working with 25 of the NEAR sites around the country. Like, I appreciate what these sites are, and I know what they can offer and what they can provide. And so that I think gives me a little bit of an advantage in thinking about this. So I mentioned earlier, the reserves are established for long-term stewardship, research, education, and training. In terms of stewardship, the reserve in the Atchafalaya would use the current monitoring efforts and restoration activities to increase physical and biological monitoring in fresh, floating, brackish, and salt marshes. This is an opportunity there is funding associated with building the swamp monitoring network. We have extensive monitoring, but there are also probably a lot of other needs that our stakeholders have in terms of areas they want to know more about. And having talks with several fishermen over time, it's like, well, their first concern is, well, is this going to impact, you know, what I can do and where I can fish? And it's like, in fact, no, there are no new regulations that are imposed on lands that become part of a NEAR. It follows whatever state regulations are in place, but there's an opportunity. If there are areas that are really important for fisheries that we do not have monitoring, we can actually establish a monitoring site in those locations to provide that real-time information that people can use. In terms of research, it provides vital research opportunities and access. It would be the only active river delta in the entire network, so it adds values and significance to the research conducted at the site. This is also an opportunity to draw special attention to our state, right? Because there is nothing like this in the network. It's this sort of end member on the whole system. And so when everybody else is doing all of their work, it sort of draws attention to, hey, there's the big elephant in the room that's missing from our entire national understanding. And Louisiana has it. So it's an opportunity to bring attention to us. In terms of education, it's perfectly situated to offer a variety of opportunities for learning. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Centrally located along the coast, provides relatively short travel distances from major coastal cities and universities. And the region is an ideal place to discuss interconnectedness of engineering, ecology, and its impacts on communities. So I mentioned these criteria when we had the screening or the scoring of our draft proposals. Overall, our region came out with the highest overall score, and for the 6 categories, it was scored the highest. However, I actually think that it's really an underscoring in a couple of these. It did have the overall highest scoring environmental representativeness, but it was only by a small amount, which is flabbergasting to me when you think about what this is supposed to represent. And especially if you consider the fact that the representativeness across the basin can all be found on state lands, which is the only part that can be part of the NEAR. So that's part of my rebuttal letter. It talks about that. And the other is the environmental representativeness to the whole network and be able to provide something that's truly unique. This is the only true river delta of these 3 proposed basins. So that is one. The other area where initially in the scoring, I think because of people's perceptions is the perceived weakness in terms of fewer education opportunities. And the primary reason that's given in this criteria is that the perceived remoteness and lack of access. Now, I think that's really an unfair thing. When you look at this basin, it's actually the most centrally located in the state to our population centers. The alluvial floodplain cuts right between the second largest city in Baton Rouge and the fourth largest city in the state in Lafayette. And if you actually include parts of the Vermilion in the basin, then Lafayette's actually directly in the basin. And those two cities are actually located within 75 miles of any point in the basin. So even if you come all the way down here over by Marsh Island, or you go up in the top, those are within 75 miles of any point. It's also only 85 miles from New Orleans to the basin. And then the smaller cities of Houma, Thibodaux, and Morgan City are obviously much closer, including Morgan City, where we are today, is right here in the middle of it, right? So it's also home to communities that represent diversity of Louisiana citizenry, including African American, Acadian, and Native Americans. If you look at the population that exists within within 100 miles of the basin, that's 3.3 million people. Within 75 miles is 2.2 million people, which just seems like a reasonable distance for school groups to be able to access in sort of day trips. Now, these are really high numbers. Maybe they're not as high as if you talk about Pontchartrain because New Orleans is right there, but think about that map I showed you of where these near sites are located around the country. The population that's within 75 miles, this is one of the highest in the entire network. Because the design of these sites is to be natural systems that we can study for the long term, to understand how they change over time. So actually our population is quite high.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Or have you drafted the rebuttal yet?
Yes.
Yeah, you have.
We had to. I had a week to do it.
Oh, and you sent it as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering, because I just wanted to make the comment, might be irrelevant at this point, but we're accustomed to traveling. And we consider Lafayette, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, actually, I would think, part of our area because we're centrally located and we're so accustomed to having to travel from rural areas that we consider this entire, area as our area.
Yeah, and that is made through. I mean, I can share with I had 2 pages to do my rebuttal too. Yeah. So I can share that with you. And also, but the overall proposal is about 50 pages, and there's lots of places where those things are expanded. I mean, I'm somebody that understands that need to travel. I mean, I work in Houma, and I work at Cocodrie, so every day I go an hour each way. I mean, it's just, this is, I think being in touch with nature and our community and area is part of the culture of Louisiana. And part of the thing that's appealing to those of us that live here is because we are connected to that in such a way that you're paying for that in terms of time you spend traveling, but we actually enjoy doing it because it's just something that we're used to doing. And so I 100% agree with that. Along with this, there are actually 860 K-12 schools with over 450,000 students that were within 75 miles. And so we actually view the remoteness as a strength because while public access is easy, research areas are not as heavily impacted as they might be in a basin that's more close to larger urban centers. Oh yeah, and then we have a lot of boat launches. So the other thing I want to address a little bit, this is part of some things that came through in our response in terms of the education. They talk about the remoteness, they talk about the fact that there is less infrastructure, and well, maybe it lacks some of the existing infrastructure and is a little bit underdeveloped, but that's actually a strength. I don't think that's actually a weakness of it. So the quality and future growth of education cannot be replicated in the state. This basin is already used by many organizations, including Audubon, Barataria Terrebonne National Estuary Program, Sea Grant, LSU Environmenters. Lumcon, Nature Conservancy. There's just a few of them besides the ones that you guys already have that are based solely in the basin to begin with. So I think it's underselling. I think there's perceptions before this review process started where some of the scoring may reflect what people had as perceptions, not what reality of being presented is. And if you look by the numbers, this is a tremendously diverse K-12 population, which traditionally underserved and underrepresented groups making up 64% of the population, and 71% are considered economically disadvantaged. So when you want to talk about delivering education program that has a significant impact on those that need it the most, in the short term as well as making accessibility from larger distances, you really can't have much more of an impact than you can have in this area. And so in terms of the comments about infrastructure, I think that the increase in infrastructure and the fact that you can go after some funding, I know there's already planned facilities that are being built in this area that could also be part of that. And when I'm asked about where a headquarters might be, I think there's no denying that we need to have some large presence right here in Morgan City for that. But there are also those funds I mentioned that are available to go after to build infrastructure. And I think we can increase infrastructure in a more adaptable and flexible way that's suitable to what we need for this site, as opposed to relying on existing infrastructure that was actually made for something completely different. Question?
When you say infrastructure, what exactly are you talking about?
Well, that's a very good question. And so what they're talking about in our comments is facilities that could be sort of a headquarters or where there may be the education displays, people come where the research operations and monitoring is based out of what they're using as facilities. And we list all, I mean, there's no shortage of those facilities here. It's just people don't think about them as much because, it's not in New Orleans. They think, well, there's infrastructure right there because it borders right against Lake Pontchartrain. But tell me how that looks like a delta. I'm struggling with that. But, and then when we talk about state lands, the only state lands that exist in Pontchartrain are here. There's federal lands, there's a lot of NGOs and other things that own lands, but there isn't much here. And Barataria is a very interesting system, but there are some, when you talk about long-term sustainability of a system, when you're going to put a mid-Barataria diversion in the middle of that, how does that impact the way you can actually study things within the NEAR network? There are some challenges. I'm not saying that they're not good. I mean, I think Pontchartrain would be a great NEAR to have if we can have more than one. I think it'd be great to have it because it's in this region, but it's more similar to other things that exist within the network. You think about it, I mean, we call it a lake because we call everything around here lakes, but I mean, it's really, a coastal embayment. And we have lots of embayments in the NEAR system. And I think that's good, but it's not as unique. So let me just get through a couple more of these things and I can take some more questions. I love having questions, but I just want to show you a little bit about where we're at. So, and I said, we really spent a lot of time before we even started in developing our proposal team to try to have a lot of partners and different perspectives on the process. And this is just a list of part of the people that have expressed support and we've had conversations with and talked to. And obviously many of you are represented in here, and we have lots and lots of letters from all of you, these municipalities in the basin. I had to make this fit in one slide. So that's not diminishing that. You're going to show up later, so hold on. So we have a lot of partnerships already. And these are not just the public entities and NGOs and other things. We have big private landowners. I mean, we have the McElhaney Corporation is very much engaged in this process and talking with us about it and offering access, which they have direct access from their boat launches through the channel directly into Vermilion Bay. They're very interested and engaged as well. We have tremendous public interest, support, and community engagement. We had over 400 people attend the town hall meetings that were about the Atchafalaya, with just right over year, I think. There were over 150 people. We had 70 chairs out to start, right? Something like that, and we just have to keep pulling chairs out, and people going all the way down the hallway over here and over on the side. The meeting that we had in Morgan City, just the in-person amount was higher than either of the other basins had in total at their different town halls. When I put in my actual application, in addition to the criteria, there was over 400 pages of support, letters of support that we had. So those include letters from grade school and high school educators and research institutions, NGOs, organizations, companies, municipalities, etc. Just highlighting some of those, I mean, in terms of getting legislative support, I mean, Senator Lane, Representatives Zarang and McGee all wrote letters. Obviously, all of the municipalities within the parish, all are represented, in these parishes are all represented here. Now we have lots of education and university support at multiple levels within each of them. So the level of enthusiasm and support cannot be matched, whether one considers the diversity of established partners, the turnout of the public support, development of the t-shirts, nice things, by community members, and then just an overwhelming number of support from people from all areas. So the bottom line is that the establishment of the Atchafalaya NER will impact the broadest diversity of Louisiana residents and stakeholders, bring special attention to our state, and enhance the overall network in ways unlike any other individual observed, not just in Louisiana, but in the network. Like, this is more different than any other one NER site is in that network. So when you're trying to figure out how our national system of coastal estuaries is changing over time, it's a really critical end member to have. So that's kind of what I got. The timing of where we're at right now is, I mentioned I had to put in a response, and then last week, the executive committee met with our proposals. We had to give a short presentation. Of course, it was scheduled when I was out in the marsh, so I recorded mine the day before, but I made it so I could get back to the camp, and then I was there for the questions, wearing my shirt, which actually, to show that's it, I keep bringing it up, but it's really impactful. When I was, during the questions, when I was responding to the things that the executive committee had, one of them asked me to stand up and have my computer so they could see the shirt better.
I have some more.
Like, so I think that's,
I have more.
yeah, but I'm just saying, I think that's, it shows the support, and I can tell you, I've spent a lot of time talking with the NOAA representatives, and that have been part of these recent NER establishments in Connecticut and Green Bay, and the outpouring of support from all levels that exists for this basin is something that they're blown away by. And so I think that we're in good shape. The executive committee decided that since they only got the full proposals, you gotta remember mine was 500 pages when you look at all the letters, 5 days before they had that meeting, and they got to see our presentations and ask us questions for 10 minutes, that they needed more time, which I understand. I mean, they realize the magnitude of how important this is, and so they have committed to making their nomination to the governor by June 1st.
So who do we write to now?
I mean, the only, I don't know, I keep trying to bring it up, and I did have a call with Kristen Ransom, who's our NOAA liaison, recently, and I was bringing up more things about the sport, and I found out that the next meeting that they're having with the executive committee, she's actually invited to attend. So to be able to talk about what the national scale network is looking for and what it is that they would like to see in this. And I also mentioned to her that the support is so extensive here that I was giving a talk after we're done. Like at this point, I am done presenting. I'm available if they ask questions, but that I'm giving a meeting now afterwards because the demand for that is so great, really resonates. So, I mean, these are the people that are ultimately going to make the nomination to the governor. So other than that, you know, Robert Twilley is still the person that is leading the overall process. And we still have the LANERR, the website still exists, so you know I can pull up my computer what that email address is for them. I think that's what we can do. It's an interesting assortment of folks, because it's primarily, we've got 4 agencies, and I don't know if any of the agencies have any particular agenda or...
So is there bias we need to be aware of? Is there...
I don't know. I wasn't part of selecting who this was. I don't necessarily see a problem with it. I mean, I've spoken with many of these folks, and you know, I've spoken to the Atchafalaya Task Force, and many of these institutions, if it's not exactly these people, are all part of this. And you know, that's actually a big plus that the Atchafalaya has as well, is that the governor established a task force for this basin in particular. And so I think that's actually a big plus. But I don't see what else we could have done. I mean, I think, and if anybody from outside, when I talk to people, my colleagues that do work at these networks, or people from around the country, they're like, wow, this is a no-brainer.
Right.
So,
some of the ladies in this group are thinking, why not even one female?
You mentioned a female from NOAA? Yeah.
Yes.
What's her name?
Kristen Ramsden.
Kristen.
Yeah. I mean, she doesn't have a vote, but yeah, well,
Really?
so I agree with you, but that speaks to a couple things. One, that the thought of this in this committee, but also these are leads of all these organizations. So why is it in this state are we structured in a way where it's all, pretty much all white men? So it's a very valid point.
So emotional appeal may not work, is my...
Well,
we can still work emotion.
I mean, I think
it's all a recommendation. I think whenever that does occur, we all need to be in the governor's ear as many ways as we can be, right? Because this is still politics at the end of the day.
If this was not politics, this would have been done a long time ago.
Right.
Because it is a no-brainer. But you know, politics play a role everywhere. I think in Louisiana as much, if not more than anywhere. And so coming at it as many different angles as we can. I mean, you know, I'm trying to reach out and follow up with right now, the legislative support is a little bit difficult because they're, you know, finalizing budgets and doing things like that, although they pretty much just came to agreement yesterday. Going through all the avenues we can. I mean, nobody can match the list of who we have for a basin. I mean, the diversity of support at the political level, as well as the individual commercial interests that is present there. I mean, we have more letters than the other two combined. And at every category of letter, we have more than the other two combined.
I have a couple of comments.
Yeah.
First of all, when you're talking about remoteness as a strength, I totally agree with you. We probably have a higher population here, I would think, of students that probably need some of that exposure. You know, I've seen stories about people, or heard stories about people taking kids on little field trips that local, that had not even seen a post office. You know, it's that kind of thing. So I think that the remoteness here should be highly beneficial to this. And the other thing is, talking about beneficial use. And so I was at a conference in Texas just a couple weeks ago, and talking to one of the ports there who are close to the reserve, the Texas reserve site, and they were saying that sometimes we think, oh, is dredging the river going to be a minus for us rather than a plus? And they're saying that the reserve loves when they dredge because they're creating more of those nesting sites and so on within that disposal area. So kind of like we have the biggest.
Yeah, so can I come on that one first? So, I mean, I basically am largely presenting here a large-scale overview and the highlights of the two-page rebuttal. So, there's a lot of things in here. And so, the uses that exist for the river and the basin are they're highlighted throughout the overall large document that we have. And in terms of like the sediment resources, so they're tremendously important here, but they're also adjacent to Terrebonne, which is a sediment-starved basin. And so the ability to have that use that we're using here, we're trying to improve navigation and create more habitat, but the fact that it also has a direct benefit right next door is something that is very important. And like I said, the thing about the NERRs that initially worry people get worried about anything. You've got the federal government coming in with some sort of program. It's like, okay, yeah, they give us something, but we're gonna have to pay a part of it. Well, what does that mean? What kind of new restrictions we have? They're not trying to come in and say you have to change the way we manage our lands. And so I think that's really important, and obviously the Wax Lake Channel, I mean, there are lots of, can you find a truly natural place in Louisiana? Probably not. Because even if you go above the Atchafalaya, the whole Mississippi drainage basin is managed. I mean, but we have contrast within this system. So yes, you don't normally have a channel that goes straight north-south 21 kilometers with no bends in it like you do the channel that leads into the Wax Lake Delta. So that's dredged and maintained, but the delta itself is not. It's one of the reasons why it's not used for navigation, because you go out one time and here's my path through, and next time you go out, you're on a freaking sandbar. And I've done that myself, so I'm well aware of it. So I think that, having that balance, whereas the main stem delta, downstream of here, obviously that is maintained for navigation. So you have some really nice natural comparisons that exist within this basin that NOAA likes. I mean, you look at what other reserves have. They're not all 100% pristine. Some of them have, but the variation in terms of the degree of management that exists within them is highly variable. So I think you make a lot of really good points. We've tried to highlight them the best we can. They give us like these criteria boxes for each one of them. And then you've got the total amount of text you can have for all the boxes combined. So it's not like each one is 500 words or something like that. You kind of move it around.
Brian,
Yes.
one of the slides you put up earlier showed reserves from Texas all the way up the East Coast.
Yeah.
And you had the big old white area of Louisiana.
Yeah.
How come we're sitting there last? If we got all these great things, how come we're still the last one to get it?
Well, we brought up politics earlier, right? So that's the reality. It's actually one of the things that when I moved here about almost 15 years ago, and I was very shocked that there was not a NERR here. I had worked in them and I was really looking forward to it. It's like, well, we have a national estuary program. We don't have a NERR. I don't understand that. That federal-state partnership, you go back when some of these were started being established in the 70s and the 80s. And you got to go back to what the political climate was at the time here in this state. And not fully understanding what the benefits were, probably because the system, the overall network was new, and not realizing what all the benefits were. And it's actually gotten better in terms of benefits over time. It was a federal program that felt like we don't need that. We're Louisiana, we can do things ourselves, and we don't need to be a part of that, because they thought that it was going to be telling us how we need to monitor and do all these other things. That's the sense that I get. It seems to fit with my understanding of what history of politics are in Louisiana. It's surprising that Texas has one, given that, but still want to be their own country, but that's all right.
Absolutely right. Correct. Thank you.
But I think that's a lot too. It's political history, because your state has to, that letter that Bell Edwards wrote that has to go to NOAA. You have to say, we want to have one. And then that process gets started. And it took a long time. There's been multiple failed efforts going back into the 80s within the scientific community trying to convince the governor to go forward and try to make this nomination happen. And so we actually owe a lot of credit and a lot of kudos needs to go to Robert Twilley, because he stuck with it and eventually got the right governor in place and got the ear and convinced that we actually were able to go forward with this. Because I think this is a tremendous opportunity for our state to draw attention to us and to benefit from being part of this large network. Yeah, I know. I can take more questions later. You guys have other things on your agenda than me talking.
And I hate, because.
No, it's fine.
I'm going to ask the question, do we have the right lead chairperson to take this on? Didn't he do a tremendous job? 500 pages, application, and the enthusiasm, I don't think can be matched. So can I have a round of applause? Incredible job putting everything together. I just can't even imagine the amount of effort and the enthusiasm of it. I mean, he wore his shirt. He told me he handled his own wardrobe.
I told you, she said, I got the email saying, someone's going to wear a shirt. So like, I have a plan.
We should have known it. And we had a couple of people walk in, and I'd like for those people who walked in to let us know who they are and who they're representing today. You came in late, and I'm going to start right here. One of my former students.
Kimberly McPherson. I'm representing St. Mary NAACP branch 6091 and Krivamani.
Welcome. And Mr. Long, he just walked in. So
wow, on the spot. That's what you get. That's what you get. I am Courtney Long, owner of Scholar Designs and Consultations, and I'm here representing a grassroots organization called Woodstock. Yeah.
And to that? And you did a prioritization, even though you had another event and presented
I did
scholarship.
this morning. I had a scholarship award ceremony. I'm Beth Chasson of the St. Mary Parish Chamber of Commerce President.
Thanks. Took a lot of maneuvering to everybody to get together. So thank you, and that was quite a presentation, and I can't wait for June 1st. We're going to be on pins and needles. Next up, we are going to talk about a resilience lab, and since it's been so long, I brought my book. It was first mentioned in this report, which was like almost 4 years ago, and we're still talking about it, but we haven't stopped talking about it. And this cost the community $135,000, and it was on this page that it was brought to us. So it wasn't just an idea out of nowhere. You need help with your slides, Mr. Hemmerling. Mr. Scott Hemmerling from the Water Institute of the Gulf.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Hopefully I'm going to keep this pretty short and sweet, assuming this opens up.
It should.
And Brian actually did a great job. I mean, I'm kind of skipped a lot of the why do we need a resilience lab here. I think that presentation just really showed the importance of how this has come to be. There we go. So as a little bit of a background, and actually I'll skip right to the next slide because we were just shown this report. And I guess the LANERR stuff started 2019. I think we're quite a bit behind. It started a year earlier. So, but essentially, that's how we were. St. Mary Excel, Monica got in touch with us after this report came out and said, okay, this one recommendation on this page said, we need a resilience lab. That's one of the things that the Urban Land Institute suggested in this report. It said, given the celebrated history of groundbreaking innovation and first-of-a-kind fabrication successes, Morgan City possesses the unique opportunity to develop and pilot projects in the emerging resilience technology space in the form of a coastal resilience laboratory. Now, why we're here today is really, and we'll go into a couple of the other things they mentioned, but beyond that, they really don't give a lot of details on what this lab should be. What is a resilience lab? How are we even defining resilience? And I will say, before COVID hit, our last in-person public workshop, public meeting was here in Morgan City doing a resilience project where we had Mayor of Berwick, Mayor of Morgan City, we had high school classes here. And that was really, because this is a fascinating area and an area that resilience is key to the location. There's economic change that have occurred over the decades. Obviously, the presentation before showed why this is such a unique, ecologically valuable area. But the people, that combination of the people and that environment are what we use to develop resilient communities. So again, this is part of what this report said. We need a coastal resilience lab. Now, one thing they also said in the report, the proximity to other relevant organizations will be important. They mentioned the Coastal Sustainability Studio at LSU. They mentioned Tulane's Bywater Institute, along with organizations like the Corps of Engineers, NOAA, and the Coast Guard are all potential collaborators. Now, they came in from outside and did it, and they mentioned, obviously LSU and Tulane got their attention. Those are the two they noted here. But if we think about where we're located, we have Nichols, we have ULL, we have McNeese off to the west, we have LumCon, and we do have, obviously, Tulane and LSU. Morgan City is kind of central to all of that academic research. We have academic firepower, north, south, east, and west, and we have the knowledge and the local knowledge here within the community. And that's part of why this is an ideal place for this coastal resilience lab. But again, what is the intention of this? What is this resilience lab supposed to be? The Urban Land Institute didn't give us much guidance on that. We're really in need of a strategic plan, and that's what we're working with the parish now to get funding to actually do a strategic planning process to decide what should this resilience lab look like. Should it be an educational gathering place where people come down and we get all these different universities? We work with the local residents. Is it economic development? Is it all of the above? We don't have those answers now. The answers, those of you in the room have some of those answers, and we need to get that information as we do this strategic planning process. So as part of our proposal that we have out now to do the strategic planning, we have a number of objectives. The first, evaluate the state of the science and information related to the parish and should be the Tri-City region. Tri-City region's vulnerability to shocks, extreme events, disasters, and stresses, long-term social, economic, environmental issues. Let's get the background information, let's gather the information, let's understand what makes this area important in terms of studying resilience. Objective 2, we want to work with the parish and other technical stakeholders to identify and evaluate economic development programs and priorities throughout the parish and the region, and identify strengths and weaknesses related to the focus and regional coordination. In other words, we want to work with parish representatives and local stakeholders and the educational universities around here. Let's identify what the strengths and weaknesses are. If we have existing economic development plans, we want to work with those. Let's find ways to work together to develop this strategic plan for the Resilience Lab. And finally, work with the parish and stakeholders to identify management alternatives that are economically feasible and acceptable and develop a long-term strategic plan for the development of the lab. That's the big part. That's the final result of what this proposal is a strategic plan for the Resilience Lab. It's one thing we need to think of. Is this a brick and mortar building? Is the Resilience Lab a physical space where we have property, where we come in and we have people who work here? Is it a virtual gathering space like we have here where we bring experts in, we have meetings, we discuss these issues? Is it a combination of these? If the ultimate goal is to get, and the ultimate goal is going to be decided by the parish and the local stakeholders. We're just gonna kind of moderate the process to understand what that is. If the ultimate goal is to get a brick and mortar building, what are the steps we need to get there? I wouldn't think we would jump right in and say, okay, we have the building, let's do it. It's okay, let's gather the group together. Let's see what type of research the Resilience Lab can do. Let's really, what's the mission statement? You know, part of the strategic planning process, what is the mission statement of the Resilience Lab going to be? And again, working with stakeholders, working with the parish to determine, you know, start with that mission statement. So the process, and this is the last slide, but we're using a structured decision-making process to develop the strategic plan. And this is something that the Water Institute has worked with the Corps of Engineers to help them develop their strategic plan, working with the Capital Area Groundwater District in Baton Rouge to develop, you know, a strategic plan for groundwater usage. It's really a way to structure the process, as it says here. And this PROACT process is how we're going to follow it. Define the problem, determine the objectives, identify the alternatives, evaluate the alternatives and consequences, look at the trade-offs, and then you make your decision. And I think there's a tendency to kind of, you know, skip that first problem and objective statement. We kind of jump right to, here's what we're going to do. We need to really take a step back and say, okay, what are the problems that we want to address here? What are the objectives? I think we all have an economic development person with the parish might have a very different set of objectives than a school teacher. I think both of those sets of objectives are equally valuable, but we have to lay those right out. We can't jump right to the end without kind of going through this process. And then let's look at the alternatives. I mentioned the brick and mortar building versus the virtual lab space. What are the trade-offs with that? Obviously, a brick and mortar building is going to require additional funding right off the bat. You're going to have to fund someone to sit at the front desk or to keep the lights on. So maybe right off the bat, we don't start with that. Let's get some projects in line. But we have to go through, again, with the stakeholders, and I keep stressing parish involvement. The parish would be the leaders in this. They would drive the plan in consultation with all of us, but we as the Water Institute or any of the other researchers, we're not the ones making the decision. We're kind of guiding people through this process. So the ultimate goal, and again, it's gonna require a lot of back and forth and meetings with different residents, stakeholder groups, and gathering this information. But again, I stress again, starting with this phase one, we don't want to jump right into phase two. Let's figure out what it is that we want this lab to be. And I think the importance of this, and to kind of conclude this, right now we're working with the parish to try to secure funding to actually do this process. But we'll end up with a strategic plan, like I said, a long-term plan where we set short-term goals, long-term goals, and working with everyone here and other folks over the course of a year or so to really go in, pull in the universities. Let's find out, you know, if we're going to think about resilience, what does that mean? Obviously, we have physical sciences, ecology. There's legal aspects to resilience when we think of equity. There's social science aspects. There's educational aspects. So pulling all of these, making sure we have all the right people in the room is key to this process, and then really moderating this process, allowing everyone to have a voice and ultimately work through this process to come up with a strategic plan. So that's where we are right now. Hopefully we'll get the funding. We're hoping by the end of the summer that we might be able to start this process. And I think to kind of tie back to the previous presentation, I think something like this in Morgan City, when we get the LANERR here, this will be, sorry, I don't have the shirt, but but I think this would be really a perfect opportunity to highlight when we get a LANERR here and bring this resilience lab in. We talked about all the great opportunities that the Atchafalaya Basin has, and we've talked about this before. Morgan City really is the gateway to the basin, and that makes this an ideal place for a resilience lab to start really thinking through some of the social ecological questions that we have to deal with here.
We have questions?
Sure.
Well, thanks, Scott. I like that. I'm actually,
I'm
Robert.
supposed to say questions up there, but ruin the drama.
I've actually seen, well, you guys have it, St. Marcel has that on your website, and Robert had actually shared it with me previously to that. I think this is a really great idea. And based on the timing you're talking about, we should know that the Atchafalaya is going to be the nearer by the time you're going to be kicking this off. And I've already pointed out the fact that I think that one of the key things, the key locations to some sort of headquarters. I think when you have a NEAR that's as potentially big an area, you want to have some satellites, like, you know, the Audubon Natural History Center has their visitor center that's right on I-10 when it crosses the river between Baton Rouge and Lafayette. So things like that. But I think a central location needs to be here. And this may be, not that I need more things on my plate, but this is really interesting to me. And I'm happy to talk about this further. But we talked about a physical location or a virtual or a hybrid. I think the hybrid is probably the way that we're going to go for most things in the future to be effective. But there may be opportunities to think about leveraging sort of a shared facility that could, you know, part of that resilience could be in here.
Yeah.
So,
and part of when I first was kind of, when we were first kind of approached to think through what this resilience lab would look like or what it would be, kind of in my mind, and you know, I'm a cultural geographer by training, so social scientist, but one of the first things that kind of popped into my mind with this is kind of like a LUMCON for resilience, where, you know, LUMCON, as you mentioned with your drive down to Cokerty, I mean, it's very far away from some community centers. That same type of operation could work here, where we can pull students in to study resilience issues. College students, high school students to come to Morgan City, and let's talk about economic reasons. Let's talk about, you know, let's look at the impacts of platform fabrication leaving the community and what it's being replaced with. Let's look at the impact of the Rig Museum on bringing tourism in. Let's look at the impact, especially if and when the LANERR goes through. That's going to bring a lot of tourism to the area. So what does that mean in terms of community resilience? And that's one thing. When we had our last workshop before COVID, when we were here, that was one thing, and it was kind of the beauty of having, you know, two mayors in the room, along with high school students, you know, where they're talking about why is it they leave Morgan City? Why do you go to the, you know, big city of Lafayette or the thriving metropolis of New Orleans? It's, you know, what is it that is causing that brain drain in the area? And these types of things can actually, you know, once we get can be a draw to bring students back to let's start studying and thinking through some of those issues. And I think that's, again, I don't want to get ahead of myself because I'm kind of putting my own vision for what the Resilience Lab is, but I think that's got to be part of it. And again, making sure we have government, the port, educators, college and K through 12, having economic development folks here. You know, if we're talking about the Resilience Lab as a location for an innovation center, I think was something that was mentioned in the Urban Land Institute. You know, technological innovation. You know, this could be a lot of things. Right now, it could be everything. So it's, you know, through this process, we're going to try to focus it down. And, you know, I definitely see a lot of coordination with that LANERR. So,
Scott, thanks for coming and talking today. And I don't want to speak entirely off the cuff, but to your point of all these research institutions, Morgan City being centrally located, and now Nichols, Tulane, LSU, Water Institute, NOAA, LUMCON, all have researchers doing great work and maybe not always collaborating. Could Morgan City be a good place to have a conference, a research conference where people present papers, have panels, lunch and learn, students can attend, and then when these researchers start to meet each other and engage, and I'm not saying that they don't do it already, but maybe they could do it more, that could be the seed for why we need the resilience lab.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And like I said, with our central location here, I think it's perfect for that. And again, that's where LumCon, where Brian works with. I mean, LumCon's a consortium of Louisiana universities, and it's a good model on how you can. Now, there is obviously, not all universities get along. I mean, they're all competing for a lot of the same things. But what we need to do is find ways to.
But that's something that can be resolved. That's, I think, again, this is a perception thing. Because in reality, what happens is people view that you're competing, but it's reality you're strengthening by bringing in the experts you need from the other ones to have a better chance of getting the money by having that. And I think, so I think it is a good model. I think you're right. This is a good place to have people meet because it is centrally located. It's not that far from any of them, whereas some of them are pretty large distances away from each other. And that's where I think granted, you have meeting spaces like this that are available as well, but I think sometimes having the hybrid model where you have some structure that's associated with the lab, you host it at the lab kind of thing would be nice.
And we keep it issue focused instead of organization focused. The issue should drive rather than organizations driving.
Keep mentioning LumCon, and I think one thing you need to keep in mind is how many times does LumCon have to be evacuated, everything pulled out and moved?
Yeah.
Here, we got people moving their cars today. I just sent a message out while I was here because the water.
No, here we have the protection here, where storm surge isn't. I'm not going to say it isn't a threat, but we're protected to higher levels in a lot of places like that, and you don't have to worry about losing research or anything like that.
And one thing I find is really fascinating about this location is your problem here is you have too much sediment. That's, I think Mark Davis from Tulane is the one who said, the state's master plan is essentially a plumbing system for sediment. And I think this is a perfect location of, if the state's master plan is fully implemented, where they are moving all this sediment. The issues you're facing here with sediment could be some of the things that we see in other areas of the state. So I think this is this is a perfect place to see what a restored coast would look like. What is, if the master plan is fully effective, this is a good test case of what that would look like with the Wax Lake Delta, one of the only land building places in the state. So this is definitely an important area to study community of resilience and social and ecological.
Scott, and I'm glad to hear you say that. We have been talking about, we're not have subsidence down here. There's no such thing. I mean, we're smothering, in the sediment. We moved 10 million yards last year. We moved 10 million the year before. That's huge amounts.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear you say that. It's been slow to catch on because the state is losing so much everywhere else, and they forget about this area. So thank you for saying that. I'm glad some of your colleagues are starting to take notice.
Well, we get the word out there. I think that gets to some of the biases in the LANERR process, kind of the inherent biases towards kind of concentrating in that kind of far south, the New Orleans area, and why some of the issues here are maybe not initially seen as important as we discussed earlier.
The fiscal part was supposed to be presented by the Parish Council, but believe me, if they're not working on getting the money, Scott wouldn't be here today. So y'all have been in conversations and emails. And I would like to give the Parish Council credit because, they always come up with, they have to admit how they're going to use restore dollars, and they took a chance, and they did something different. they did something different. They decided to use their federal restore dollars to fund the stuff that Scott was talking about earlier, about this plan. You gotta have money for a plan to engage the Water Institute, which is a great source of knowledge and technical knowledge that we couldn't come up with to drive what this resilience lab is gonna look and sound like, to drive this process. So kudos to the Parish Council for doing something different.
Goes to you, because without your persistence on this,
Well, we're
we wouldn't be
persistent.
here.
We sometimes we need to know what we're doing, but we are persistent. So, yes, but I don't want to diminish what President Hanegraaff and Mr. Lagrange have been doing. And now Ellen Boudreaux is joining and championing this. So that's all moving on the underside, even though we don't see them today. I will make apologies for that. So, next on the agenda, after, I think, is our Maritime Academy.
Okay.
Yes.
There we are.
So we're kind of opening this up to a bigger group, because we've been working on this for about a year and a half, at least. So Mr. Swiber.
Go back to the folder here. Shoot. See, Scott exited the folder. Where they were.
Probably my fault.
Good. So I'm the exploratory committee chair for St. Mary Excel for the Maritime Academy exploration. I'm not doing that for a living. I'm the executive vice president of Diamond Services Corporation, just a local civil construction and dredging contractor. But let's jump right into it. So the committee is exploring the prospect of a maritime high school in St. Mary Parish. So I wanted to start with what is a maritime school. I have two examples highlighted up here. Laser. I have two examples highlighted up here. These are not the only two maritime high schools that are in the country. There's actually, if you took that NEAR map and made the same dots, you'd probably actually find that maritime high schools are often in the same places as NEARs. There's one in Long Island, New Haven, Connecticut. There's two in California. There's New Jersey. There's Baltimore, Maryland. There's a Palm Beach, Florida. So whenever you find a lot of coastal communities and a lot of hubs for coastal commerce and research, you can often find a maritime-focused high school or academy, or in some cases even elementary schools. But these two had some pretty good mission statements. So one of them is the New York Harbor School that we've looked at a good bit. And there, as you might imagine, in the New York Harbor, they have this mission statement that I thought was nice to share. The New York Harbor School provides a college and career preparatory education built upon New York City's maritime experience that instills in students the ethics of environmental stewardship and skills associated with careers on the water. That's a mouthful, probably because it needs to be, but if you want to sum up sort of the mission that I think we've also had in mind with the school in St. Mary Parish, I think that would pretty much encompass it, right? You've got a combination of engaging with the coast, a place where students do not have a sterile education that is, even though near the coast, I think a lot of the times in our education right now, we never engage with that coast while we're in that system. Now, right when I was in elementary school, loved the trip to LumCon. I think LumCon provides a great opportunity for students to come, stay a night, catch some crabs, see some of the basic research that's going on there. That's great, and I think running with that concept of learning the same things you learn in normal, high school education, but through that maritime lens, whether it's science or history, Louisiana history, and of course your technical and vocational opportunities, and your recreation, to do that in a way that actually engages with the environment that we're in and that our communities are historically extremely familiar with, would be the mission of the institution. This maritime high school, not super descriptive, is it? This is one that newly opened in Seattle, Washington. And I thought they had a pretty good one there about student learning that centers on the environment, marine science, and maritime careers working on or near the water. Project-based learning, community partners, industry experts, hands-on experiences, skills to launch a maritime career, and also ready to continue studying in 2 or 4 year college. Now, of course, everything I'm saying up here is all part of our exploration. Nothing's in stone, nothing's done. We are all just talking, a lot of talking, but productive talking. But I think it's been a focus for everyone that's contributed so far, that the ability to go into immediate post-high school careers, but also to be prepared for 2 or 4 year college experience. I don't think anybody wants to narrow the school down to just a college prep or just a vocational school, and I don't think that would serve the students particularly well either. So as a general mission statement, that's the goal. The goal is to create a plan for potential funding in the future to have a school that serves the community in this way with these mission statements or a similar mission statement. I can't do the slides on that. What are the impact goals? Sort of similar with the Resilience Lab. We got to think about what we actually want out of it. Economic development is a key feature, and which is why a lot of the focus has been on the idea of having a residential component to a potential high school. It brings students into the area to study and to interact with our economy here. To address a workforce skill gap, a lot of employers, as one, and I talk to a lot of employers in the area, we hire a lot from outside of the area, people to come in here and do jobs that necessarily our education institutions aren't really, not that they're doing a bad job, but they're not focused on gearing students maybe towards some of the jobs that are along the coast. And the workforce is extremely robust when it comes to coastal jobs, and that's a huge umbrella. You could be talking about aquaculture, coastal fisheries, oil and gas development, infrastructure, platforms, offshore wind, coastal restoration jobs. I mean, if the CPRA gets their master plan fully funded and they have $50 billion in projects to do over the next decade, people will have to do the jobs. That is something that is maybe a bit understated when the CPRA wants to make plans. Who's going to do all this work? It's going to be probably kids who are in high school right now. And they need to know and be ready for the opportunities that are going to come along, or else we're going to have a lot of people coming from outside the state, doing work, and then going back home. So there is a workforce skill gap. In the inland waterways, I don't know what the future of the economy looks like. I don't know what industries we'll be employing, but I can tell you what, the inland waterways are not going anywhere. They will still be a main vein for commerce throughout the nation, and we're right here where the Atchafalaya River and the Mississippi River all exist. Those jobs, those aren't going anywhere. So engage a new generation with Louisiana's coast. I mean, I don't want to, there's an aspect of, we don't want to lose the cultural tie that our communities have with being a part of the coast of the basin and the marsh and the swamp that we have down here, right? In an education experience that maybe you get a loss of that cultural language and those skills and abilities. So, there's probably a lot of kids graduating high school right now who don't know how to fish when they finish, maybe because their dad didn't teach them how to fish, to have something where we keep that kind of common cultural coastal language going and those skills. I think that's a big part of preserving the heritage of South Louisiana and the St. Mary Parish area. So that's another goal that we've had throughout those meetings. And to provide a new and innovative learning environment for students, so project-based learning. A lot of educators and a lot of students don't necessarily vibe well with the norm, what you might call the traditional just regular K through 12 experience. Maybe some students would be much better engaged with hands-on learning opportunities. I find it. I think we fault a lot of students for not being totally fine with sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day and being told things. I would call that actually normal to benefit from project-based learning, hands-on experiences. And so that's a lot of the impact. This is another one from the Maritime, from the Harbor School in New York. What did you do at school today? And you got a student here who's working with her hands and outdoors. And I think that is something that everybody could really appreciate. So what we've done so far, and what I've done, and what St. Mary Excel and the committee have been doing, is really just getting a lot of feedback. Talking to people, what would you want out of such a project were to really materialize, and how could you help? So we've worked through some of these institutions, you know, not all of them yet. SLCC, you guys are next on my list. But
I was going to ask you about how you could work together.
Right. So right now we're just calling all of these a lot of these organizations. This is not an exhaustive list, and just saying, you know, what could you bring to the table? Because some, like I've got up here, NGOs like Restore and Retreat, the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana. You know, these guys bring a lot of energy, a lot of knowledge, resources. They know how to leverage resources to make projects happen. And they also, when you talk about developing a curriculum or opportunities for students, once the high school is established, to get out on the water, or maybe even to volunteer on coastal restoration projects, which can have, you know, the benefit of also showing them how that work is done. Those organizations have been pretty receptive to those ideas. Restore is we've highlighted as a potential source of funding, which I'll get to in a little bit. And of course, Nichols is up here as a representative for higher education in the area, right? Like I said, we've got at least 3 universities with centers for coastal studies. Tulane seems to have like 2 or 3 different ones, and I'm not quite sure what the difference between them is, so let's just call it one. And so, you know, them providing those academic resources, could you do dual enrollment programs with Nichols? All of these things could be on the table. I had to put NOAA in there because of what a LANERR could do in conjunction with a school like this. I mean, if a LANERR needs an educational opportunity as something that could be a part of its mission statement, then obviously engaging with a local maritime high school would be something that would be mutually beneficial in that way. CPRA touches everything that involves the coast here. So I threw on the Chamber of Commerce here because local employers providing senior projects, internships, and some of that hands-on learning experience would be an integral part of such a school. Of course, the Port of Morgan City, I could kick myself for not throwing LumCon on there, but like I said, this is a very partial list of just the stakeholders that could be involved in a variety of ways, whether they're sources of funding, whether they're sources of expertise, curriculum. If it's just a group of volunteers, that's always nice when you're trying to do a heavy lift or sort of a big project like this. And that's where we are now. Like I said, nothing's set in stone. The current concept is a 10 to 12 residential college preparatory and vocational high school located in St. Mary Parish, and that's about everywhere where we are. And we're still kind of in that community, NGO, government feedback phase, but also thinking about where to get money. You know, I've talked to a lot of people who've started schools, such as New Harmony High School in New Orleans, and the Maritime School over there in Seattle, Washington. A lot of them, they were able to find from charities, the Gates Foundation or somewhere else, those startup funds to build a campus and to build a school. And that is tough. You sort of have, you don't luck into it, you make your own luck, but there has to be the opportunity there. Which is why St. Mary Excel submitted a grant request to Restore for funding for this. We could probably follow up with another round with a lot more fleshed out once we sort of have the concept and a planned budget. But you know, so the chicken and egg is to find the startup funds to start a school, and also the continuing and recurring funding. So I mean, obviously every high school is going to get funding from the state MFP, but a residential school and one with extra capabilities than your average high school is going to need supplemental and additional funding. And so you have to find both of them. No one's going to give you a one-time without your recurring, and no one's going to give you your recurring without a campus and a building and a school. So our next steps are trying to, and as we were speaking with Monica not too long ago, really the first step into getting either source of funding is to get the community engaged and hyped up about it, because if it's a small group that's asking for a big project, it'll never get done. It needs to be a lot of groups. Just like, I mean, what we saw with the LANERR and packing the rafters, hey, we'll focus on the LANERR and getting that out first, but maybe when we have the LANERR, the next step could be packing the rafters and saying, let's build a school here, let's use these resources, and let's do something.
Oh my goodness, I have a suggestion. Could we start with just offering the courses on our high school campus and establishing the need for it and the people, and then using that to ask for funding, like using that as an indicator for why we need the funding. I mean,
I think you're saying we're not from SLCC.
Second year and then you go to fourth.
Like for,
You build a whole path.
right, so our Jumpstart, we have 2 curriculum pathways, and I'm sure y'all are aware of this, but we have our college-bound pathways and then we have our career-bound pathways. And in order for them to get a Jumpstart diploma, they have to have a concentration in a certain area. So right now we offer EMR, we offer welding, we offer, what else do we offer? I don't remember. Carpentry, medical things. And so ENT, EMT, you have to have maybe like 6 hours or 9 or 12, I don't know the exact number, but you have to have so many courses in this cluster, this concentration, and a lot of our kids leave with certification. We offer dual enrollment programs, you know, all these things. So if we could even just get an instructor on our campus to start and kind of show, you know, educate the students and then show that, hey, we have a full class, we have 2 full classes, hey, we need more, we can't house all these kids, we need a whole building. And we've also talked about adding like a freshman academy to the high school, because sometimes the freshmen, like you said, a specific, if we could just build a building in the back and put just the freshmen there, teach them how to act socially and academically and like focus just on.
You need to do that younger than freshmen.
Right, but you know, there's like a really big gap there.
Okay, Monica, I think you had an answer to that.
Okay.
All right, so one doesn't preclude the other. I think that's important, and that's the first thing we did, because I mean, we were public school. I mean, Morgan City High was my school.
Right.
So we don't want to take anything, but we don't want to also limit you. So one doesn't preclude. We were looking more at the residential and looking at the Natchitoches model as far as an economic development tool. And the thing that this book really, really focuses on is building the foundation of a new economy along the Atchafalaya River. And a residential high school would bring students, just think of it. I live in Shreveport, but I can learn about the Atchafalaya and the coast because I can come and reside here and attend this school, Maritime, because it's going to be open to any student in the state.
Sort of like the
Louisiana School for the
Yeah.
Staff.
Right.
Yes.
Right, exactly.
So
That is
you've got a
also
great
special
idea.
mission.
So don't stop. If that's what Morgan City High or Berwick or Centerville, we're not duplicating anything. If they would like to take a maritime approach, that's still okay. This opens it up to everyone in the state, creates new jobs, and ties in with our community college, because we don't intend to, in fact, we love that simulation and we love everything the community college has. So it's a great partnership, and as he says, he's coming, and that's a deep conversation. It's an exploration right now.
Right, very exploratory.
Yeah, well, I think this is good. I was going to say, I don't think that they need to be exclusive. And what you're doing though is by trying to build them both, is you're highlighting the demand that exists and trying to use the models. I mean, I think obviously you mentioned one time, I mean, that place-based experiential learning is something that we have a lot of experience doing. Not everything has to be, this is going to take time, and so this is going to take, you got to build to it. So sometimes it's not just a full regular course that's over a semester, but you can be having, scaled down models of it, like sort of the workshop model or internship where you're doing something in a short duration of time that kind of builds and get those experiences, figure out what the courses might look like. You can be trying to do some of that. That's things that we have some experience looking at. Obviously you have SLCC right here. Fletcher is in the next parish over. I'm on the Coastal Advisory Board with the curriculum development. They've had programs that are in place that are designed for training people in those jobs that are going to be associated with CPRA type work going on in the future in terms of the restoration. I know SLCC does some of those similar things too. Looking at those models, what do those students need to be able to walk right into those programs?
Don't forget Nichols Coastal Center as well.
Yeah.
Did you have something?
That was one of the things I was going to say. And not only the Nichols Coastal Center, but we also have the Louisiana CTAC, the Coastal Technical Assistance Center, is a partner of Nichols. It's housed on the Nichols campus, and that program was designed to connect coastal jobs with the master plan, coastal local businesses and agencies to do coastal work. So when I think about that, when you're talking about internships and things like that, we're gonna know with this workforce what they need, what they want, what they desire, and that connection. So that's another, that's another something you may want to add to your list.
I'm signed up for CTAC. I get all the emails and I participate in the webinars, and I'm just now learning it's associated with Nichols. So
It's
thanks
on
for
the
that.
campus.
It's fantastic.
It's a partner of Nichols, yes.
Well, thank you for that. As a local business person, just trying to go from oil and gas to the coastal restoration work, it's really been a nice resource.
I'm going to make that introduction. What is the
Absolutely. So, Scott?
I'm just gonna say, thinking about coastal resilience, this is key to coastal resilience. I mean, ideally, in 10 years, you won't have a Yankee like me up talking to you. You'll have one of your high school students now who are doing this work and talking to y'all. So I think this type of training is the types of things that we learned at our workshop that is needed to keep people here in the area. So I think this is really.
I still think of you as one of us, Scott.
I do believe that most of the population is tied to like the offshore jobs into oil field and whatnot. And I believe that this maritime high school here, whether it be for classes or an actual high school itself being built, whether would you say it was Natchitoches? You said it was?
It's residential. In other words, students can come from anywhere in the state.
See, I love that transfer schools, but just from being amongst my peers and with who I share classes with, they are very interested in offshore jobs in the oil field because their parents are. It's mostly all jobs in this area are somehow tied to the oil field. Right, and they proceeded away to start a career, to start a life in this way. And I believe that given this opportunity for high school students, this will advance their interest and their opportunities in this area. So I'm very much on this.
And as far as next steps, I think the next step is also going to be to have a nice in-person meeting in a room like this just for the Maritime High School exploration. We've had some Zoom meetings, but of course now the in-person meetings are becoming increasingly possible again. So if everybody's on Monica's distribution list for St. Mary XL, I think that a separate meeting for just this kind of talk, this back and forth, this exchange of ideas, once we get input from a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of advice, will be the next appropriate step.
I'd like to say kudos to whoever put this agenda together. Because you hit the federal, the state, you hit the vocational tech, as you said, and the marine courses. You've also hit four-year college. You have everybody in this room to build exactly what you're looking for on both sets of proposals. And then we've also opened the discussion to maybe sharing resources on the resiliency lab, the LA Atchafalaya NEAR that we're hoping to get. I mean, this opens such a broad spectrum of areas that you can hit, and you've got the people in this room that can make that happen if we all come together and not stop communicating, because that's the biggest thing. When things always hit a wall, it seems like. But if we all work together and we make sure we know who each other is, we can definitely put something together that'll make all this become a reality. So kudos to whoever put the agenda together.
Yeah, thanks to St. Mary XL for bringing us all together today, and I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. Swiber, for bringing. Before we go into updates, we've got an important agenda item, Enhancing Community Resilience Initiative Overview. And this Jessica Sims came to see me in a private meeting, and it was 4 of them and 1 of me, and I had no way of communicating everything that she was there to share. So we thought we'd bring it to a bigger group, and this is the group. And she comes with resources and possibilities. So we will see how it might fit into everything that's been discussed.
The National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, the Gulf Research Program. So we are a private nonprofit. I see the nonprofit side. And briefly, so I'm just going to talk about the academies, Gulf Research Program, the unit that I work for, the Health and Resilience Unit, and then the EnCoRe initiative. So, okay, the Gulf Research Program. We have lots of money. $500 million from the criminal settlement from the Deepwater Horizon disaster. Our charge is to establish a program focused on human health and environmental protection. We have about 30 years to spend all that money. We are carrying out very vague studies, projects, and other activities. And the National Academies will be the body that determines ultimately what we do with the money. So the vision here in the strategic plan is developing a more safe, resilient, sustainable future for those of us who live here. And I apologize, there's lots of words on this PowerPoint, and I am going to try and move quickly so you can have access to the PowerPoint if you'd like to read about it. You can also go to our website. So within the Gulf Research Program, there are these 5 units: offshore energy safety, health and resilience, that's mine, environmental protection and stewardship, data analytics, impact, they kind of cross over all of us, and then education and engagement. And these are some of the programs that we are working on. Where do we work? We work generally in the Gulf Coast and the Central Coast of Alaska. Even though we're called the Gulf Research Program, we do some stuff in Alaska. All right, so the Health and Resilience Unit. We are, these 3 documents are really what guide the activities of the Gulf Research Program. So this charge in the BP spill settlement, a consensus study, 2019 consensus study, building and measuring community resilience, and also the strategic plan from 2020. Within the Health and Resilience Unit, these are kind of they're the programmatic frameworks. 6 community capitals of resilience, these 4 strategic approaches, and the social determinants of health. Social determinants of health are really the environmental conditions that ultimately determine your health and well-being. Goals: advancing equitable health and climate resilience efforts in the GRP region. And this is the way, those 3 points are how we are going to do it. Okay, so within the Health and Resilience, we have these two efforts. One is the Gulf Health and Resilience Board. They fund a lot of grants. I think Scott has benefited from one of those, and actually all of you, those of you in St. Mary, for the Resilience Lab. And then we have this Enhancing Community Resilience that applies the science in select communities. So, and the reason really that I'm here is St. Mary Parish, Morgan City is one of the places that we are looking at to be one of those communities. Some of the recent grants that we have made, so EnCoRe has grants as well as the Gulf Health and Resilience Board. Again, these are on our website if you would like to learn more. But some of them, innovative community engagement methods, and these will really inform how we go about putting together the program for EnCoRe. Some more things that we are doing, and actually, I should have began this way. Has anyone in this room besides Scott and Monica, of course, heard of the Gulf Research Program? Brian, and someone from Nichols, great. Okay, yep, good. Now you all have. So I live in New Orleans. Most of my colleagues are in Washington, D.C., and we are trying to get folks to learn about what we're doing, and we want to make an impact. Yes. Okay, the EnCoRe initiative. So here is the challenge, which we are all intimately familiar with. Climate-related disasters are increasing. I was reading about the delightful loop current yesterday, looking a lot like 2005. Yeah, so we are, we're facing some pretty big wicked problems here. The EnCoRe initiative, this is our vision, healthy, climate resilient communities. We're really coming to the ground level and want to talk to folks who live and work and breathe in these places. What do you need? What are your priorities in becoming a more climate resilient community? We are going to get there to healthy climate resilient communities by building community capacity. And yeah, we support equity-driven research and practice. So EnCoRe will have these 5-year partnerships, and we hope to have about 15, 20 communities over the next 10 years. We are looking at issues, the intersection of climate, health, and equity. And building capacity really is about cultivating partnerships, leveraging resources, engaging multiple stakeholders, and applying data and science into decision making. So we have these two complementary approaches. This community-driven approach, which we will put together community action boards, which will be comprised of local government, local businesses, community stakeholders, community leaders, and you all will decide what to do with that money. What are your priorities? What do you need to do to be more climate resilient? The Learning Collaborative is in development, but we are hoping to, and we like the Resilience Lab, we don't know if it will be brick and mortar or hybrid or virtual, but putting together these resources for folks in the Gulf who can share and leverage them and work together. Oh yes, that's the same slide, but in development. Our methodology here. So we are all the way on the left. We are still in development, and we're kind of looking at that list there is going to help us develop the program from here on out. So we've got another consensus study. Folks are helping us decide how to choose the communities. We've talked to lots and lots of people who have given us a very long list of places to look at. We've given out all this money for grants. We have committee working groups. We're putting together these profiles of all these places. And when I and some of my colleagues visited with Monica earlier last month, we are visiting and talking about what's going on in here. How can we help? I mentioned these earlier, the community action boards. We're looking at trying to find nonprofits that are working again at that intersection of climate, health, and equity. The Learning Collaborative, we'll put all that stuff together. It's really a year of planning. You'll get kind of initial grant and figure out what you want to do. And then you will implement year 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. We have a group of smart people who are helping us figure this out. There they are. And I finished. Sorry, I tried to move quickly, so there's only now 6 minutes left of this meeting, but thank you. And
you said you're looking at this community, so what drove you to look here?
Morgan City and St. Mary Parish were recommended by a number of people that are familiar with the area. Y'all have we've talked a lot about oil and gas, right? It's a really important part of the economy. One thing we're looking at in the Gulf Research Program is energy transitions, and so. Yeah, I mean that's yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I just felt like we needed to go deeper, especially because she says we're being looked at, and she also emphasized that she brings money. which.
Yes, everyone's studying.
Until this point, we just haven't had anything that physical, that much of a reality. But I think the development since 2018 on the initiatives, the connectedness, everyone working together, the funding has to follow where the need is, and hopefully we presented the need, especially after the year-long river stay flooded. You forget about that because Max got it all going now, but we forget about when those challenges do exist. So we're going to go quickly now because we presented an agenda, but then if there's something that you really want to share, because you're coming from somebody, we're going to give just a minute or so because we've gone a little bit over, and we haven't.
That's my fault.
That's all right, Brian. You're the right chair, so it's okay. You deserve to do that. So I'm going to start with St. Mary Excel for just a minute. One of the things you picked up was this. Besides all the things going on in the environment and the resilience lab and LANERR, we got a grant that allowed us to do some business support. I can't say enough about Evan Boudreaux. He facilitated 2 of these meetings. We actually got funds to hire Mr. Mott and Mr. Boudreaux to support local businesses. So if you want to know about some of the tax incentives, tax credits that are available to local businesses, these are YouTube videos. I'll send it to you electronically. They do a really good job. There were a lot of workshops that we did virtually because, with COVID, they couldn't go out and meet and provide technical support to businesses, so we put them into YouTube videos. And then if you know anyone that's a business that would benefit from this, let them complete this application because we still have a little money to pay Mr. Mott if they'd like to go in and sit down with Mr. Mott and say, here's my finances and I'm thinking about this project. What kind of suggestions would you recommend? Or if they want to go see Mr. Boudreaux and say, I've hit this legal hurdle, what can you recommend? And we have to expend this money or it goes back by June, so don't delay on that. And that's the other thing that Excel would like to share at this time. So we'll just go around if you want to share anything or pass.
Okay.
Anyone on this side want to share anything? Because usually it's the mayors, and the mayors, they usually have a lot to share.
Just that the levy district's here in support of anything. Life chain's complete. So more and more protection going in every year.
So I just want to add the channels open from the Seabuoy all the way in. We'll have dredges going back out there by the fall, but Bayou Shane will be dredged this year for the first time in about 15 years. It's going to be, we have a lot of businesses out there in the mini area, Bayou Buff. A lot of fabrication going on, and it's going to help those businesses continue to get attract more business. So that's it.
Big day coming up, June 1st. We all got to keep our fingers crossed for that. So, there are a lot of things going on. Got to keep pushing.
Can you tell us what's June 1st? Oh, that's the LANERR decision?
Hurricane season.
Oh, hurricane season.
We already got something we're worried about, so,
We're really not worried about that. We're more worried about Brian. June 1st is the deadline.
Okay, sorry, I missed that.
I would like to thank Ms. Smith for bringing myself and JP over here to this. This was very eye-opening in my opinion. I love Dr. Bryan's presentation and Dr. Scott's. Very insightful, as well with Mr. Swiber. I love that idea of having maritime high school, in my opinion.
Appreciate you coming to the next meeting.
I will. I will try.
But all the kids need to be exposed to this and y'all, and we brought this up at Rotary's New Generation Forum. That was one of our things, is that we need to bring y'all into the schools. I can't stress enough that they don't have any idea what's right around them, and if we don't expose them, they'll never know. And right now we're really facing sort of a crisis in education. They don't see the value in it, and I think we need to start having more conversations with them and talking to them and exposing them to things like this, because that's going to be the only way to motivate them in the classroom.
Thank you for making it a priority to be here today.
Can I back up? I skipped a turn, but I just thought about this as you're talking. Stephen, you talked about bringing researchers together in Morgan City for collaboration, some kind of a little conference or whatever. You know, if you invite some of those researchers to talk about what they're doing, it might be a great opportunity to do it before some of the high school students to be able to pull them in.
Absolutely. I was going to offer that because I've shared papers at conferences when I was in grad school, and I remember it being very eye-opening, and for them to see that people are doing work. I mean, just the fact that they're putting papers together is going to be exciting. And then speaking in front of a crowd, that is something they could probably not fathom. And then to hear just the technical and academic and the language, the advanced vocabulary as well, to be around people who are educated and forward-thinking and professional, they need to see more of that.
And I extend the levy district out to the schools. I mean, I've said this for a number of years, and you just said it.
Yeah.
They don't know what's right outside their doors protecting them and what does protect them. Because a lot of times, and we see this in the general public, is you got a storm coming, and you know, the weather system, weather stations put out certain things that say, oh, you're going to have 8 feet of water in this location that's, you know, a major town or city, and that's not the case. And it's just because they don't have the information that they should have to be able to put those things out. Whereas if they had a little bit of knowledge of what is protecting us in these areas, they know better than that.
Right.
So yeah, we're here. I
Absolutely.
was a teacher, so I enjoy getting out and sharing that knowledge with, again, kids that have no clue what's right in their backyard, what flows through Morgan City, Patterson. You know, this is a major area, and it kind of gets overlooked, kind of redhead stepchild, and there's a lot out there. So we're here.
Well, and the Rig Museum and Mr. Charlie is always available for any of these groups at any time.
Other than that, thank y'all for all y'all efforts. You know, it's very well put together, and as she said, it's the group that y'all have is phenomenal. So thank you.
Going to the back.
Hey, one little comment, and Brian's going to put us on the map.
I'm trying.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, to the back. Anyone want to share anything out?
The only thing I would like to add is there a media campaign for the LANERR, the Atchafalaya River project? I mean, have y'all reached out to, like, you know, Facebook, Twitter, all of the social media to get the word out and let people know that, hey, are you aware that there's a choice going on and this needs to happen? And, you know, are you aware, you know, 'cause if you inform the community will stand up and reach out to the governor's office and whomever and say, hey, we need this for our area.
Well, that's a great segue in, and I'd like to give Catherine Holcomb credit. You see, she's moved from the GoPro to her cell phone, a personal cell phone. And a lot of what has taken place through these YouTube videos, through Facebook, has been done through her phone and her videos. And the LANERR, we didn't even have a GoPro, you know, until all this came about. And we even counted the number of likes we got on Facebook and sent that to Brian for inclusion in the package. So yes, we do have a Facebook presence, we have a YouTube presence, we have a Twitter presence, and we count the number of likes. So, you know, if you see it, like it, share it, and all of that went into the application because we went back and counted ever since the first presentation that Kelly and Margaret did and how many responses they got. So, we're going to continue that. But I want to personally thank Catherine because she's. So we're going to go ahead and close the meeting, and we're going to allow the small conversations to take place. So, but thank everyone wholeheartedly.